Well, for more reaction, we're joined by the GOP Executive Secretary for Kansas, Alana Raithley, and the Democratic strategist, Bernard Whitman. Bernard, to you first of all, how on earth can this happen? I mean, the tweets have come in thick and fast. How can the Democrats run the country if they can't run a caucus?
Well, let's place the blame where the blame lies. It's technology, it's the Iowa Democratic Party. I mean, clearly the process was an unmitigated disaster, but I mean, it's easy to point fingers and talk about who's the biggest loser. The Iowa Democratic Party, the technology system, Joe Biden. But let's talk about who the big winner is. Besides Bernie Sanders, who was expected to win, I got to give it to Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg, 9 months ago, nobody even knew who he was, couldn't pronounce his name. And now it looks like, if initial reports can be believed, he's coming in a close second to Bernie Sanders, at about 25% ahead of Elizabeth Warren, far ahead of Joe Biden and Amy Klobuchar. And I think this gives him huge momentum moving into New Hampshire. So I think the big winners here, Bernie Sanders expected, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren will fight to live another day. Biggest losers, the Iowa Democratic Caucus system, Joe Biden. And I think it's time to retire Iowa as the first in the nation caucus. It just doesn't make sense anymore. It hasn't been in a long time.
Alana Raithley, I mean, it's embarrassing for the Democrats, but, you know, it's a long way until the election next November. This is something that will be long forgotten by then, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, something chaotic happens every day in politics. So this is really just another opportunity for that to go, and it will be forgotten. I do want to point out one thing. I don't think it's time to retire Iowa as that state. I think as the first state, I think this has been done for the longest time, and it shouldn't be changed, because if a person can win in Iowa, it really shows that they are a contender for the rest of the country, and that when they have won in Iowa and done well in Iowa, it's always had an outcome that has shown that they're going to do well throughout the process. So I think it's still a really good indicator of the success of the candidate.
Bernard, do you think it matters who wins in Iowa? I mean, given President Trump's barnstorming win last time, so many people believe that he is going to walk it straight back into the presidency again, and the Democrats don't have a hope.
Well, I mean, it does matter and it doesn't matter. Why does it matter? Because it creates momentum, it creates attention, it drives money, it gives support to going into New Hampshire, to South Carolina, to Nevada, gets a lot of press and buzz and media attention. On the other hand, it doesn't matter because, particularly on the Republican side, the field is littered with candidates who won Iowa: Rick Santorum, Ted Cruz, Mike Huckabee, that never went on to get the nomination, let alone to be president, has a much better chance of success in predicting the Democratic nominee. But still, it's only about 50-50. So I think, to Alana's point, I do believe there is value in Iowa to the extent that the voters actually get to meet the candidates, know the candidates, see them up close and personal. The problem I have with it is notoriously unrepresentative. It's almost 90-odd% white, does not reflect the rest of the American population, A. And B, it really disenfranchises a lot of voters who don't have the time or ability to spend hours and hours and hours queuing up for caucuses, standing there, defending their positions and so forth. People like caregivers, parents, working class people that just sort of locked out of the process. So I think from that perspective, it's a fairly undemocratic representation of American democracy.
Alana, do you think that's a fair point? I mean, we all have different versions of democracy, don't we, across the world. Do you think the American system is overly complex and slightly convoluted?
I think caucuses are pretty complex. That's not how it's done in every state. We do primaries here in Kansas, and I think that works really well for us. But I would say that the caucus is a little bit difficult for everybody to participate in, but the benefit of getting that time with the candidates, I mean, personally, I would trade that for anything, just to have that opportunity to be around the candidates, to personally meet them. You essentially get a year with those people in your state with so many chances to meet and really understand what they stand for. I mean, I think that is really, really a great benefit to being a resident of Iowa.
Bernard, from what happened last night, and we obviously are expecting the results later today, we don't know what they're going to be yet, but do you think that there is a clear standout candidate of somebody who will be able to take on President Trump for the Democrats?
I mean, I think there are a handful. I think Bernie Sanders clearly right now is the front runner. I think he's displaced Joe Biden as the front runner. We'll see what happens sort of after New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada. I think Biden is seriously weakened. I think Pete Buttigieg now has to be taken seriously as a potential nominee against Donald Trump. I think there's no question that he's got a huge groundswell of support, major momentum. And Elizabeth Warren, I think, may have resurrected her once frontrunner, then failing candidacy. But let me talk about one person who wasn't on the ballot really in Iowa, who may be a huge beneficiary of all of this, and that's Mike Bloomberg. When Joe Biden seemed like he was going to start stumbling, Pete Buttigieg, I think, picked up a lot of Joe Biden's support. Now Pete Buttigieg's his position is fairly solid. Mike Bloomberg is spending a lot of money in the Super Tuesday states, which happens in 28 days or 27 days from today. And I think he might be able to come in and pick up a significant amount of support that currently is in Joe Biden's camp. So we may have a 3 or 4-way race going well into the spring.
Alana, who do you think President Trump is going to fear the most doing well?
I would say that Bloomberg does have a really good chance, and that was a good point. I think we're seeing Biden get lower and lower in the polls, and I don't know what will necessarily happen with him. It kind of depends on a lot of things right now. I think Elizabeth Warren will eventually drop out as well. I think we'll end up with Bloomberg, Sanders, and Buttigieg as our last 3.
Interesting stuff. Alana Rately and Bernard Whitman, thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.